Really happy to see everyone here at this early hour on a Saturday. I don't think I've ever been here at this early on a Saturday. I actually know that for a fact. So it's really nice to see you all. My name is Manon, in case you weren't around yesterday and didn't get a chance to hear from me then. And I'm a doctoral student here at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies and also in the anthropology department at Yale. And I have the honor and privilege of having put together this plenary panel for you this morning with three really remarkable ladies who you're going to hear from. But before they begin, again, if you were here yesterday, you already heard this once or twice, but I'd like to begin by acknowledging the relationships of Indigenous peoples and nations to the land on which this event is taking place this morning. We recognize that Indigenous peoples and nations, including Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Shtaticook, Golden Hill, Pagosset, Niantic, Quinnipiac, and other Algonquin-speaking peoples, have stewarded through generations the lands and waterways of what is now the state of Connecticut. We honor and respect the enduring relationship that exists between these peoples and nations and this land, which, as we know, was forcibly taken from them. As we celebrate the work of communities, and especially women this morning who are engaged in restoration of lands and forests, it's really critical, I think, that we also recognize the fraught relationship that has existed between Indigenous Native peoples and environmental conservation for centuries, as well as restoration for centuries. So, with that said, this panel really grew out of the concern, a personal concern that I hope you share, which is that, recent evidence suggests that it's women who are and who will be the most affected by climate change and environmental degradation. This comes out of the United Nations Women's Report. Yet despite these findings, women's diverse perspectives, experiences, and knowledge largely remain absent from conservation policy and environmental research. Furthermore, too often, women who are experts in the realms of ecological restoration and conservation, and who are carrying out restoration projects within their communities, often at great cost, are excluded from international conversations on science and policy. In this pivotal moment of environmental action, the year 2020, and going into the decade of restoration in 2021, it's more critical than ever that we recognize the work of women who are leading the way in conservation and restoration, but who often remain hidden. This panel brings together three women working in Uganda, Madagascar, and Kenya, who are proven leaders in conservation and restoration, and who have worked with communities to carry out restoration at a grassroots level. By highlighting their incredible work, we recognize that when we amplify women's unique experiences and knowledge, we are better for it. So, we're first going to hear this morning from Dr. Sylviane Volampeno, who's the president and founder. Wait, hold on. I'm going to introduce you, and then you come up. She's really eager. She's the president and founder of Mikajy Natiora, a Madagascar-based conservation association that undertakes community reforestation. She also works as a lecturer in the Department of Animal Biology at University of Antananarivo in Madagascar. As a student, she studied animal biology at the University of Antananarivo before receiving her PhD in zoology from the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, focusing on the blue-eyed black lemur in the Sahamalaza-Il Radama National Park in Madagascar. In 2013, she founded Mikajy Natiora, an organization that conducts research, disseminates findings to the public, and engages local communities in grassroots conservation activities. Please welcome her to the stage. Okay, t'es prête? Okay. Here you go.
So, hello everyone. My name is Sylviane Volampeno. I'm from Madagascar. So it's a great pleasure for me to come here, and I would like to thank you, especially Manon, to invite me to attend this such a great conference. Today, I would like to share about our work on the involvement of women in reforestation. here is the outline of my presentation. I will talk briefly about the Mikajy Nature Association, and then I will, some of you might know Madagascar, some of you might not know, so I would like to tell you an update about the deforestation and the reforestation actions, and finally I will talk about the involvement of women in reforestation. When I did my PhD in 2010, I put some recommendation on my thesis, and I say one day I would like to realize the recommendation. And when I was students, my inspiration are three ladies, because I'm a primatologist, so my research focused on primates. So my inspirations are Diane Fossey, Jane Goodall, and Alison Joly. So when I finished my PhD, I said I would like to make a difference for the community, because when I did my research, I spent years with them, stay with them, know how to live with them, what they need. So that I decided to create a Madagascar conservation-based non-conservation association called Mikajy Natiora in 2013. Mikajy Natiora means protect the nature. As I'm a primatologist, I did not focus only on lemur because, you know, Madagascar is a hotspot country. Most of the biodiversity are endemic of Madagascar. So we focus on research and conservation. So our mission is to protect the Malagasy endemic biodiversity by combining ecological research and local community involvement. The members are composed of Malagasy multidisciplinary biologists, and the majority are women. We are now about 10 members because it is a non-profit association. None of us get paid, so it's like a more volunteering work. And we have a primatologist, ethnologist, ornithologist, and botanist. And we work in the northwestern part of Madagascar, where located my study site. Madagascar, before, I would say long time ago, maybe 60 years ago, Madagascar is well known as a green island. Unfortunately, we called it now Red Island. Why? Because of the deforestation, which is an environment issue. And nowadays, 80 or up to 90% of the regional forest cover is gone. The main factor of the deforestation in my country are human population growth and the business. Why human population growth? Because our staple food is rice. We eat rice 3 times per day, in the morning, lunch, and for dinner. So we used to do the tavi, which is the slash and burn agriculture. So the people, the local community, it's everywhere in Madagascar, south, east, north, west. They cut hectares of forest, burning during the dry forest, and then put fire, and then grow rice. Charcoal production. The majority in the cities or in countryside, they use firewood and charcoal. So this is one of the factors of deforestation as well, and fire and logging. Why fire? Because most of the people, they do not keep their cattle, so they are grazing everywhere. And last year, there was a serious fire which affect a national park in Majenga, and the thousands of hectares were burned. I'm saying business. Why? Because we have precious woods, ebony and rosewood. And it's not the local community who do this business. It's more Chinese people. I don't know, thousands and thousands of containers were exported in Asia, not only in China, in Singapore, in everywhere. And until now, the government could not manage it, which is a sad story. And the mining exploitation, there are some legal mining companies, but illegal mining companies are growing too within the forest. So, as we know, everyone, the factor climate change. You can see the first picture, this erosion in my study area. The picture in the middle, it's happened a few days ago before I left Madagascar. We had a very bad weather, and it's affected flooding. That's from the north until up north from the north until the east of Madagascar, and of course it might cause biodiversity left. And recently, the government made a challenge that we want to make in Madagascar a green island again, because planting trees, that's for the generation future. So everyone, it's not only conservation NGO, but everyone would like to realize it, so that we are trying to do our best to save the biodiversity. So why involving women? More than half of the Malagasy population are women now. And in my country, they are legally have equal ownership rights. And nowadays, more and more women hold important positions like village chief, mayor, president of important association, and the minister. And now, out of 24, we have now 7 women ministers in Madagascar. Women can learn quickly and comprehensible. Why can learn quickly? If you want to give them some instruction, they can learn, and they are not ashamed to ask you some questions. And of course, they are the main users of natural and forest resources, and also they are vulnerable to the forest destruction. Recently, last year, as Mikajy Nature is still a young conservation association, so far we conducted 2 reforestation. But the first one, we did not involve women especially, but it's like all the communities. But for the second one, we involved with the local communities. So we carried reforestation January last year. There were about 90 people who participated, and the majority are women and school children. It was held in the northwest of Madagascar, and we did the reforestation surrounding the village for exotic trees that they can use for every day, and within the forest for the restoration. What are their involvements? Before, I think, when I was still students in the area, there was an American NGO, Wildlife Conservation Society. They work with the local communities. I think it was maybe 15 years ago. They did some training on tree nursery or reforestation to the local community, including some women. And I'm glad, because when we did our project, these women are still now. They still have the skills for how to prepare the tree nursery. So the women were involved from the collection of seeds or sampling, and then after that, the establishment of tree nursery stations. So they take in account about the size of the station, the location, the condition, because some of the seeds, they need full shade, they need some sun exposure. And during the reforestation, they are keen to select the young seedling that we will plant. And also, after the reforestation, they were in charge to distribute the refreshment for everyone. So what is the challenge that they face women? Physically, of course, women are weak compared to men. That we found that because our reforestation are located in a remote area, so the access is very difficult, so you have to walk up and down. So during the monitoring for the reforestation, it was the women could not charge anymore. So we need men to monitor to see the survival of the trees. So that was the challenge that we met. So what is our next step? Recently, we received the funding, and we are planning to do reforestation per household. Why? Because it makes women to be responsible. Yeah. So that this is our next step. So the conclusion in my project: women are self-organized and serious people. They are strong, very dedicated, and they care about the future. So thank you for your attention.
Okay. Great job. Okay, thank you, Sylviane. That was great. Just bear with me. Okay. Great. Okay. Next, we are going to hear from Atalla Joan Angom, who is a senior environmental officer and agricultural natural resources officer working with the Alebtong district local government in the northern region of Uganda. She was a speaker at the SCR 2019 World Conference on Ecological Restoration held in South Africa, where she spoke about building community resilience towards climate change impacts through watershed restoration under the theme of social, cultural, and philosophical dimensions, restoration for socio-ecological resilience. She's also a former fellow of the United Nations University Land Restoration Training Program. Please welcome her to the stage.
Good morning. How are we? We're okay? Yeah? Okay, that's great. I'm called Atalla Joan, Senior Environment Officer. It's Acting Natural Resource Officer, Alebtong, yeah. I must say from the onset that I am honored to be on this platform. I was telling Paul that, I seem to be surrounded, PhDs, masters, and I'm like, what am I doing here? But it's a positive challenge towards me, and I'm grateful to be here. Let me go straight ahead. The structure of the presentation, I'll begin with giving us an understanding of the project area. Then I'll look at the wetland ecosystem functions and services, the status quo in regard to climate change impacts within Alebtong district, maladaptation as the community strives to respond to some of these impacts which they're seeing, and then what Alebtong district local government is doing to build community resilience to climate change impacts through watershed restoration and hopefully address the maladaptation and try to draw them away from it. And then I will look briefly at the socioeconomic and cultural barriers to women's engagement in restoration activities. So very briefly, Alebtong is a district located in the northern region of Uganda. We're up there. And Uganda is located in East Africa, bordered by South Sudan, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, and the DRC. Okay, what have I done now? Just to try to highlight a little about the project area, I'll be referring to watersheds and wetlands throughout my presentation. A brief definition of a watershed. It's all the land area that provides water to a specific stream, lake, or other body of water, including all the living and non-living things within it. Why? Because these things use and can hold water too. They are part of the watershed. I know that there are very many definitions that can suffice, but for now we can work with that one. And then what is a wetland? I just wanted to bring out that a wetland is a subcomponent, or it falls within the watershed. So when I talk about the wetland, I'm, in general, just referring to the project area at large. Wetlands are areas where water covers the soil or is present either at or near the surface of the soil all year or for varying periods of time during the year, including during the growing season. So straight away from this picture, we can already see some of the social and ecological, the ecosystem services and functions which are, can be realized from the wetland. We see a diversity of fauna within the wetland, and this bright young man here, he was able to catch some small fish, which I'm sure he's planning to use to complement his evening meal. And again, we're seeing this water body here. These kids actually, they use the area for recreation. You'll find them swimming when it's very hot within the water and really enjoying themselves. I came across this gentleman early in the morning, and he was going to hunt for wild rabbits in the wetland area. We also have fish, which is a cheap source of animal protein for the local community. Cheap if you're the one who has caught the fish. But if you're buying from them, it's like 20,000 Uganda shillings, which is approximately $5 US. And it also helps them to get some kind of income to support their homes. So these are ways in which the wetlands support our community. And this man here, he also caught some Claria species. I also met him along the way. What am I driving at? I just want us to, really appreciate the ecosystem services and functions which are rendered by wetlands, which help us in the light of climate change and really bring out that wetlands are actually a safety net. They can really provide a safety net to the local community when it comes to some of the impacts of climate change, hence the need to ensure that they are sustainably utilized and they're not degraded. We talk of groundwater recharge. The wetland has the ability to purify water through underground aquifers, and this water is available to the local communities in natural springs, in wells, in boreholes. They fetch the water for domestic use. The water within the natural springs can be drunk. It's actually quite good. The wetland is a store for water. It provides surface water where livestock can go and drink. It helps in water purification by means of the wetland vegetation there. It helps in flood control. It's not just riverine wetlands that help in flood control. When you have some of these inland wetlands also, after you've had a season of like a prolonged dry spell and there's a lot of soil capping, when it rains at once and there's a lot of rain falling at once, we tend to have flash floods. But the wetland area provides an area where this water can collect and stay such that it doesn't cause harm to the local community by, let's say, damaging infrastructure or damaging crops in people's gardens. It helps in sediment retention. It helps in lowering the velocity of surface water. Like I said again, when the soil has been capped and it rains heavily, there's a lot of surface water moving. And sometimes it can really build up volume. But the wetland vegetation helps to slow down the momentum of the water such that it has less impact upon the infrastructure within our communities. That's helping our communities move from one area to another. It's really sad in a situation whereby you have like flooding, and then you have a pregnant woman and she needs to access a health center, but she cannot cross, this flooded area. What's the impact upon her and upon her child? You have school children, they want to get to school, they're sitting national exams, but they cannot cross over. We have had incidences of the more vulnerable in society, the old women, the elderly, the women and the children getting drowned as they attempt to cross areas which are flooded. So the wetlands help in addressing some of those issues. They aid in nutrient retention. They are a biodiversity hotspot. A wetland is where all the cool plants and animals, they go to hang out, yeah? You have a small wetland area, but the diversity of fauna and flora within that area, it's amazing, as opposed to a large area, which is not, like a wetland area. And aquatic habitat, of course, that's there. And they're an important carbon sink, because wetland soil, as a result of its, its anoxic condition, there is a reduced rate of decomposition of organic matter. So wetland soil is actually able to store more carbon as opposed to agricultural soil elsewhere. And then of course the sequestration by the fauna also within the wetland. So wetlands are really something which I feel are very important. What is the status quo? I'm only going to look at erratic rainfall and then prolonged dry spells. Erratic rainfall affects the crop calendar. Previously the farmers had been able to predict that it's going to rain from this season to this season. I'll organize my seeds, I'll plant this and this and this. But these days it's very hard for them to plan. They don't know when to plant. They don't know when the rains are going to come and for how long the rains are going to come and the intensity of rainfall. And it's really leads to a situation of food insecurity because you're not really sure what you're going to realize from your garden at the end of the day. It also impacts upon them because you might plant your crops and then either it rains or it doesn't rain, and then you have all the seeds which you had spent money buying or something, and they are lost. You have to look for money to begin buying new seeds again. So it's a bit disorganizing. There are high post-harvest losses. Let's say now you've anticipated sunshine, you've spread out your maize or your groundnuts on the compound to dry, and then suddenly, it begins to rain out of nowhere and it doesn't show any sign of ceasing. This poor farmer is going to have his harvested crops inside his house, growing fungus and getting molds because he cannot, go out and put them out to dry. It leads to increased incidences of pests and diseases because if the weather situation favors the multiplication of these pests and diseases, you can actually end up with an outbreak. It leads to flash floods, as I've already mentioned, erratic rainfall, especially after a prolonged season of prolonged dry spell. And I just want us to look at this, this letter here. 26th of September 2019, those were the last rains. And this is a letter from the sub-county chief writing to the chief administrative officer, just giving a brief report of what's on the ground. He's talking about many homes have flooded, causing pit latrines to fall. He's talking about crops in the gardens are being destroyed. He's saying roads are impassable. Already there is starvation amongst communities since food crops have been destroyed, and there is fear of outbreak of cholera because of unhygienic conditions as latrines are collapsing. I mean, that is the current status quo within the district right now. And this is just a list of data which was collected by an extension officer concerning the acres of different crops which were destroyed within the different villages in that sub-county. Again, here you can see pictures of the Simpson Garden, which is submerged in water, and this is the bridge that actually connects Alebtong district to another district. Okay, so I need to rush a bit. The status quo in regard to prolonged dry spells. I have two videos. Maybe I'll just play one. How do I do that? Okay, maybe you can just help me.
Which one do you want to play? This one?
Let's just play that one.
Okay, it's fine. I downloaded it before. Which one of these two? The top one?
Let's just play that one, okay.
I am getting closer to the tap, but I have wasted a lot of time here. I left home in the morning before preparing food for my children. They must be crying now.
We need more boreholes. We have to pump water for a whole day to be able to have enough for our animals.
Climate gets more scaring to communities. Cattle have been dying. People have been forced to migrate for long distances and a long time to search for water and pasture.
Okay. So I'm just going to try and skim through what I have right now. Right, we're looking at high temperatures and frequent, intense, and prolonged dry spells. You have seen a short video there. Women have to move longer distances when the water sources dry up in search of water, and this impacts them in a number of ways. They waste time moving over all this long distance, whereas they could have engaged in other productive activities. They find that they're wasting time moving to and fro. There is domestic violence because in the traditional African society, it is the role of the woman, it is the gender role of the woman to fetch water, to prepare food, to ensure that the clothes are washed. She provides bathing water for her husband. But in the event that the water source is so far, she's not able to prepare a meal on time. She's not able to provide bathing water readily for the man of the house. She's not able to have his clothes perhaps clean on time. And the gentleman will come back and, in some instances, they are not understanding. She may be verbally and physically abused, and he may tell her that, you know what, you're not strong enough, you're not able to perform your role, you're not strong enough, in quotes. Sometimes he may decide to take on another woman who he feels maybe is strong enough. So we have this whole issue of domestic violence coming up. Rape and, exposure to other hazards such as snake bites as they're on their way, moving longer distances in search for water. Poor health because, carrying like a 40-liter, sometimes they put 2 jerrycans on their heads, that's 40 liters, because they want to save time. And that has an impact upon your spinal cord and upon your health. And then child neglect, as was mentioned. She has gone to look for water. She has left the young toddlers at home. Who is attending to them? Resource use conflicts, migration of pastoral communities, and social disruption. Those actually come out within the second video that I have up there, but I'm not going to play that right now. So communities, in response to the prolonged dry spells, they tend to flock to the wetland area because they cannot cultivate, they cannot carry out agriculture elsewhere because the rains are not there. They converge within this area and they struggle to carry out agriculture. They use poor agricultural practices, such as poor agrochemical use that leads to water point contamination and death of livestock that ingest the water. There is bush burning and total land clearance that leads to biodiversity loss. There's drainage of the wetlands, which leads to reduced fish stock because, the fish which I showed up, Claria species, it prefers anoxic conditions. So when the wetland is drained, the soil is oxidized, it cannot survive. It leads to habitat loss. The buffer zone, which should ideally be there in riparian wetlands, is cultivated. So the soil is exposed. There's a lot of siltation and soil erosion and sedimentation taking place. The water depth becomes more shallow because of the sedimentation that's taking place, such that when it rains, the capacity of the wetland to actually store water or the stream to store water is reduced. As such, when it rains heavily, it easily floods, or when the sun shines for some times, it easily dries because its capacity to store water has been reduced. And then, of course, there's bush burning and total land clearance and other activities they embark upon to diversify their income, to get some monies, charcoal production and brick production, and these activities lead to species loss. For example, Vitellaria paradoxa, that's the shea nut tree. They prefer that for charcoal because it has high bulk density. And then brick production, you're going to cut down a lot of trees in order to burn these bricks. So quickly, what is Alebtong District Local Government doing? Alebtong District Local Government is building community resilience to climate change impacts through watershed restoration. Projects are enshrined within the Northern Uganda Social Action Fund 3, which is coordinated by the Office of the Prime Minister and funded by the Uganda government and the World Bank. It's a coordinated effort. It's a concerted effort. I will not take all the credit for it. There are so many sector heads and departmental heads who work together to help the community identify projects that address the environmental challenges within their watershed. There are nursery beds which are being established. There are spring protection, which is ongoing to ensure that there's safe water where humans can get water aside from where the livestock get water. There's institutional greening, agroforestry, woodlot establishment taking place within the communities. There's the construction of fish ponds as an alternative means of generating income for the community. And then there's also road construction, like this area didn't have a bridge, but as a result of the project, they now have a bridge to cross from one sub-county to the other. So there's also construction of market stalls for the sale of agricultural produce, and we provide seedlings which are more resistant, drought tolerant, pest and disease resistant, fast maturing, to help them tackle some of the climate change issues. Environmental and social safeguards are embedded within all the projects to ensure that there's gender inequality is handled, overexploitation, inequity in the distribution of household income, waste management, land degradation, they're all enshrined within the environmental and social safeguards. And one might argue that, the list of projects, the list of things which I've shown might not per se be termed conservation or restoration, because I've talked of like so many things, fish ponds and the rest. But I just want to highlight that when you're looking towards conservation work, there is really a lot of need to ensure that you look at the societal dimension, environmental and economic dimensions, because within our communities, where the community are highly dependent upon a natural resource base, if you don't find a way of linking and addressing the economy and the society, you know, it's going to be very difficult to realize your environmental goals also. So quickly, the socioeconomic and cultural barriers to women's engagement in restoration activities. My time is up. Okay. The socioeconomic and cultural barriers to women's engagement in restoration activities. We have a largely patrilineal system of land ownership whereby land is passed down from father to son. This is a disincentive to women to engage in restoration activities because they do not have rights of ownership and decision-making rights of the land. They have access and use rights, but they cannot say that, okay, this land, I'm going to set it aside for this function, you know, in regards to conservation and the kind. So it's a disincentive, that patrilineal system. There is inequitable distribution of household income is a disincentive. This is actually enshrined within the New Staff project because it's one of the issues we try to address. There is what we call labor-intensive public works, whereby they receive some small income for their engagement in restoration activities. So, in our society, the man is the head of the household. So the man and the woman may both be brought on board. They receive their small money for their engagement. Then at the end of the day, the man says, Madam, please, bring the money here, bring the money here. And, you know, he takes charge of the money. So we address inequitable distribution of household income within the projects. We train them upon that. Women don't have a voice in decision-making. However, women... they are a wealth of untapped knowledge. Yeah, I have seen this in the work which I do. They are a wealth of untapped knowledge. They'll sit there quietly. If you don't probe them, you might not get anything out of them. But believe you me, they have a lot of knowledge. In the nursery bed establishment, it was the women who identified that hibiscus species, we call it malakwang, it's a plant that we eat. But they identified that hibiscus species can be used for biological pest control in regards to the nursery. Instead of applying some of the pesticides, you just plant the hibiscus species alongside, you know, the seedlings which you are raising, and all the bugs and pests which would have eaten the seedlings, they all go on what? The malakwang, the hibiscus species, and they eat the hibiscus species instead. So they are a wealth of knowledge. They are excellent planners who analyze things in detail. Can I have a hands up from women here? We are excellent planners, are we or are we not? We are excellent planners, you know? Yeah, we look at the nitty-gritty of things. I've been in situations whereby I'm in a room filled with men. I'm sorry, please just allow me to finish. I'm in a room filled with men, and I'm listening to their conversation. And, you know, they're discussing something, and then I realize that, but how are they going to get from point A to point B? How are they going to get from point C to point D? And I interject, I'm like, hey, guys, what about this? What about that? And so they go on, and then they get stuck. Then they go back, hey, Joan, what were you saying? And I'm like, okay, it's like this and this. Then I listen some more. They go on. Then I interject, you guys, what about moving from F to G? Then, what are you saying? I'm like, okay, it should be like this. Oh, okay. Then they talk, and I'm listening. Then they stop talking, and they're quiet. And I'm also quiet. Then they look at me, and they're like, Joan, can we have your input in this? And I'm like, you go, girl. So women are excellent planners. They are most in touch with the land. For example, they're knowledgeable. I have not heard of a gentleman, a musée. A musée is an old man. We don't usually go to the musees, the old men, to ask for like knowledge about herbs and traditional medicines. We usually go to the old mamas. They have a wealth of knowledge about what these plants do, which part will help you do what, and you know what it can bring about. So the women have a lot of knowledge. They are much more in touch with the land. And then there is this one point which I will conclude with.
Your last point.
Yes. This is my last point. Okay, I can go on and on forever. So I can never be supervised by a woman. That's a statement which I heard recently before I traveled and came here. We were sitting together, men and women, you know, local government staff, and there was a position, people were applying for vacancies, and somebody suggested to a certain gentleman that, why don't you apply for this post? And he was like, no, I can't apply. I can never be supervised by a woman. And we were seated there, women, and we were quiet, you know, we were stunned. And then one of the men asked him, why? I cannot work under a woman. It just doesn't work that way. I cannot work under a woman. Then they asked him, one of the men, but would you work under me? I have no problem working under you. No, I have no problem working under you. I can work under you, but I can't work under a woman. This is true. And today, we have men and women in non-traditional gendered occupations, yeah? Because for him, he was looking at the traditional gendered like role kind of thing, whereby women are submissive, they're under the man, you know, you say yes to everything the man says. And he really wasn't able to move ahead because he was enshrined in that traditional gender role. So today we have men and women in non-traditional gendered occupations. Women are also taking on more leadership roles. So this will not only be constricted to, let's say, conservation work or, you know, it cuts across borders. We need to be able to address this in one way or another, such that we are all at par and we can all work together. Otherwise, you might find sometimes women fearing to take on these leadership roles because they're also fearing that the men will respond in a particular kind of way, and the men not willing to adjust to having women in some of these positions, and, you know, it can bring a bit of friction. So we have to see a way of working on that. Thank you very much. I will stop there.
I had a feeling that was going to happen, actually, didn't I, Joanne, when we were talking? I think it's clear that Joanne's an amazing leader, and also this is her first trip to the United States, I should say. So we're like really honored to have her here, and also she's a wealth of knowledge, and hopefully we'll be able to have a larger discussion after our last speaker comes up about these issues, which are very important issues. So last but not least, I would like to introduce Beverly Mugure Gichiri, who's the founder of Mugure Agriventures Limited in Kenya's Kajiado County. She's a passionate farmer and practicing permaculturalist who works to empower Maasai youth and especially women through agriculture. Through her work, Beverly aims to combat poverty and nurture young innovators while fostering sustainable community. She not only strives to advance farming policies, but she's also an advocate for the rights of girls in Kenya. In 2018, she was named the Youth Champion in Agribusiness under an FAO-EAC partnership. She was also a 2019 fellow as part of the Professional Fellows Program, Advancing Women Agribusiness Entrepreneurs and Innovators, which was hosted at Michigan State. So please welcome her.
Good morning. Again, my name is Beverly Mugure, and I will go directly to our main discussion this morning, and we are talking about highlighting women's voices in grassroots restoration, and I basically just want to address how women's voices could be heard and what local communities and local government have done to ensure that women's voices are being heard. First of all, in my experience working with the local women, I came to realize that women emerging from poor communities are vulnerable to natural disasters and hazards and climate change. And when we talk about that, how can the grassroots women how can their voices be a key role in restoration? So one of the things that the government of Kenya and international organizations are doing in Kenya is filling public roles with women. They're perceived as key stakeholders in development processes. So in Kenya right now, we have a position of the women's rep, and this position was put there specifically to allow the women to be represented in parliament so that the women's rep can represent the poor women and the community. So that is one way that Kenya has been able to address women issues. The other thing is we are developing policy and economical programs for the women to transform social economies in different counties. So those basically dealing with schools, that is education, the health system, and the transport system. We find that we are now even having women who are taking roles in the transport industry. We are having women taking socioeconomic posts too. Another thing about how women's voices are being highlighted in restoration is that women have started forming groups. We call them chamas in Kenya. Chamas are groups that women have formed basically to be able to save money. And I've seen this is working for Kenya because 10 women come together. They save like 500 shillings every week. So the money could be put in something. So for example, the women will say, this week, Chama, we are giving rice, just rice, to this specific family. So these groups have become very important because the groups are the places where we get a lot of information. The women are able to talk to each other. The women are able to highlight their issues on the ground. They're able to see how they can be able to move forward, and they're able to highlight different kind of problems. For example, if in our community there are these chamas, it is very easy to know if there are students who are not going to school. It is very easy to know if there's a lady among them who maybe have cancer and don't have medical assistance. The other thing that women have been able to form groups, we call it community resilience, where the communities have been able to come together. So they come together and they put their lives in order. For example, we have programs where women know exactly what time they need to fetch water, so they divide that into different households. So the way we were seeing like Uganda queuing, in Kenya, I think it is more or less than that. Women have been able to know, like on Tuesday, these people are going to fetch water on Wednesday, to just give room and be able to manage the community. Also, women in Kenya now no longer use firewood. Of course, there are those who are still using firewood, but we have found these chamas, the groups that they are doing, they also buy gas, and that has really helped in restoration because it has reduced the cutting of trees, because many poor women, they use firewood. Now, with the use of gas, like the gas cylinders, this has been able to really save trees. And instead of them cooking also with cow dung, we make like the charcoals, they make biogas. The other thing that the communities have been able to highlight the voices of women is adaptability. I personally believe that apart from financial resources, I think poor women are also expert in restoration. And what are some of the examples we will say? Women know exactly the problems that they're going through, and sometimes it is not that they don't know how to tackle the problem. Sometimes they just don't have somebody to show them or to give them a direction how they're going to tackle the problem. So it has led them to start adapting to the condition that they're living in. For example, women in the Maasai community will not build a house with stone. They just prefer to stay in the manyata, and the manyata, they make it to the cow dung. So that has never changed in Kenya. It's been many, many years, even before I was born. And if you've been privileged to go like to Masai Mara or Kajiado, that's just the way they live. And they're not trying to exploit stone or to mine. No, they are happy to stay there. Another thing, I believe that there cannot be development and restoration if women's rights are compromised. So women's rights, that is in terms of education, that is in terms of getting them health, that is in terms of electing them to positions in government, and women's voices, even to fight for girls' rights in terms of FGM, early marriage, rape in Kenya. So I think gender equality has played a very big role in this kind of work. Another thing that I want to talk about is about how women's voices have reduced violence in the community. By women speaking and being able to raise their voices has brought a lot of confidence among the Kenyan women. So the government have become more careful with how they do a lot of things, because if the women start speaking up about education, about rape, we have seen so many organizations coming in and supporting these women to just make sure that their voices are being heard, and this has streamlined the government, and we can say because of that, there is a lot of discipline. Before, many women were scared to come out to say how they feel and if they were raped or if their children have gone under early marriage, but right now the situation has changed in Kenya. A woman is empowered, a woman can be able to go to court. We have the law that protects the children and they protect the women. When I want to talk about restoration and conservation, especially about growing trees and being able to protect the environment, I think there is, apart from just growing trees, we need to also build a community that is responsible. So we are talking about younger generation whom are going to take over after us. And the success of all those projects will be seen on how disciplined we will be as leaders and how we are going to transform the next generation and making sure that they are disciplined and they're going to take care of the trees that we are growing. We also would want to develop an ethnic community where young people not only just grow trees or study about forestry, but we want people who are going to be distinguished and individuals who are not going to feel excluded. So it's going to be a place where everybody feels at home and everybody can be able to work together for a better world. Lastly, the issue about deforestation is, in my opinion, I will say that we are all, I wouldn't want to say that we are not excluding men. I think we should all be responsible, both men and women. But we have seen that also the men have started assisting the women, especially in growing trees. And like I talked about yesterday, we have seen a shift on how men are looking at women in assisting in climate change. So for example, the Maasai community, we are trying our best to make sure that the girls are not going to fetch water in the river, and this is being done by the men because we want the men to understand how important it is to secure those rivers. Lastly, I will say that the success of conservation and restoration is not about the number of trees and standing trees that are going to be on a certain terrain. It is the ability to secure and enhance livelihood, strength, and the relationship of the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Beverly. And I should also say that Beverly was here as an Innovation Prize finalist. And so if you had a chance to hear from her yesterday, hopefully you had a chance to learn more about her work. So at this point, I'm going to invite all the panelists to come up on stage and have a seat. And we're going to have a group discussion that's going to be moderated by Dr. Amy Vedder. Dr. Amy Vedder is an instructor here at Yale. She's worked in applied conservation for more than 30 years, using ecological and social science to conserve wildlife and wild lands. She currently teaches here in the graduate program at Yale F&ES, focusing on the practice of international conservation. Formerly, she served as Vice President of Wildlife Conservation Society, Director of the WCS Africa Program, Senior Vice President for Conservation, at the Wilderness Society, sorry about that, and Senior Advisor to the Rwandan Environment Management Authority. There's just too many things, I lost my place. Amy is known for her pioneering ecological studies of mountain gorillas in Rwanda during the late 70s, and as the co-founder with her husband, Dr. Bill
Weber.
Why did I just not? Yeah, Dr. Will Weber, of course, of the Mountain Gorilla Project, an interdisciplinary program that addresses diverse local, national, and international interests. So what's going to happen now is that Amy's going to start us off with some questions that she wrote for our panelists, and then hopefully we'll have time to open questions to the audience before we have a coffee break.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to bend the system a little bit, and partly because of time and partly because we women are very adaptable. We have to be in life. First say, you know, I know none of you had all the time you would have liked for your talks, and you've heard from each other. And I'd like to first see if there's a conversation that our speakers want to have amongst themselves, given what you've heard each other dealing with, struggling with, as women in restoration, as women in your cultures. Are there things that you would like to follow up on first? Otherwise, I'm happy to jump in. Okay. I will jump. One of the things I thought also was interesting, and I would like to point it out before we lose time, is how impressed I am with these three women and the strength that they show, having grown up and lived in a culture that was, the wildlife conservation was very male dominated. I've seen it change drastically over time. I've never had anything like the barriers to overcome that these three women have. So the work that you're doing and the leadership that you are showing is tremendously inspirational and important. So thank you.
Thank you.
One of the questions I have, and I'd like to get towards what do you do, because I'm a practitioner. What do you do? Beverly, you talked a lot about government programs. I guess I'd like to ask you all to tell us more about what you do on a site-based, in a restoration project or program. What are some of those techniques that you're using to try to amplify and assure women's voices in the work that's being done? Policy is extremely important. I've seen it have tremendous impact in Rwanda, but I'd like to hear more about how, as practitioners on the ground, you deal with these inequities and raising those voices and the enabling and helping to assure leadership of women in the midst of so many huge barriers. Mm-hmm. Maybe start with Sylviane or Joan.
Mm-hmm. For the case of Madagascar now, I would say maybe 10 or 5 years ago, it's very common to have women association and to involve them for conservation. But in the area where we work, because we started to working there about 2 years ago, we did not have time to establish an women association because it's make them to be more dedicated, to be more dynamic, to gather in one group as a women association, and because as a part of my job, I'm a consultant at the ICN for the SOS Limor project. So my job is to visit all of the sites who has a Limor project, and most of them have a restoration project. So most of the women in some of the study sites, they are involved in reforestation. As I said, as we do in our study site, they are in charge. They are in charge from the beginning of the establishment of the tree nursery station. So I think this is a good point. This is a good strategy to involve them, because if you want to trust them, they will be collaborative, responsible, and they can. I'm not saying that they compete with men, but they like to have like an intention that they like that we care about them and we can trust them. So and now the government, they would like to have the gender equality. Yeah. So now and in Madagascar too, we have lots of civil society. They are leading by women against for rape, the violence, for children violence. So I think that it's growing now to involve in women, and I think it's a good strategy. And now it is very impressive. Now some of them are starting to do some hard work. For example, some of them starting now to do some like a forest patrolling. You know, to do some forest patrolling is not easy, especially in case of Madagascar when you are working in the rainy season. But some of them they can do now. They can cope to do that now, which is good. And
there are two things you're mentioning here. One is creating or allowing space or encouraging women's groups,
yes,
which is separate, and dealing with women,
yes,
and encouraging women in their own space in a
yes,
way. And the other is something like patrols, where women need to self-declare, and in a mixed group of men and women, where you may
yes,
have some pretty
yeah,
strong asymmetries. So I'm just interested in, are each of these equally valid or productive or effective processes, or are they, and is it good to have both, or do you find more impact and more quick reaction of women and their abilities to take on these things, or their allowance to take on these things, in one versus another. And maybe if you could comment on that, and then Joanne, is your major interest in a project and a program to encourage these separate spaces for women to blossom, or is it to mix and show that there are equality within a mixed group of genders?
No, I think that the first one is like only women, yeah, because in Madagascar, in theory, men are the head, like in household, but in fact, the women manage everything, for the child care, for cooking, even for the financial, and not only like in big cities. Most of the family, if I have a joint account, like okay, the woman can withdraw some money, can go to the bank to collect some money, and this joint account is for both of them. So it means now that this is not like quite similar as like the case in Uganda, because as Joanna said that I was a bit surprised to hear about the guy who said I can never be supervised by a woman, which in a country in Madagascar that some of them, the men, they would like to have a woman supervisor because they think that it's like my mom, so I can have more attention to and the women are nice. So,
Joanne, in given that statement where you have worked in, each of these are different series of cultural contexts, but in your context, Joanne, where it seems very extreme, how do you deal with the patriarchal system of law and culture and existing relationships when it's so extreme?
I don't know whether to say it's so extreme. I don't know how to put it there. Is my mic on? Could I just first of all go back to answering the question, the first question you posed, because I was actually working on that one.
Absolutely.
That was a one-off incident where he actually came out and said, I cannot work under a woman, and we were all shocked. Yeah, because we also never heard it before, somebody to declare openly, I cannot work under a woman. So I don't know how many men would declare that, but that was the first time we heard somebody actually saying that. Concerning the involvement of women, when we go down to the field, we know very well that women will feel a bit timid to speak up and to voice their opinions and their decisions. We try, as we are planning together with the communities, sometimes we separate the men from the women so they can have separate discussions. The women will feel more comfortable to talk sometimes when they're by themselves than as, when the men are also there. So we try to separate them at times and get, the different views coming from them. In the projects also, we try to ensure that there are equal numbers of men and women. Like if you have a group coming up, there should be equal representation of men and women. If there are 20 men, let's have 20 women also on board. We try to ensure that balance is there. We're not dealing solely with women groups in the project I've talked about, so we try to ensure that equal numbers of men and women. I think our presence there also within the community, like as heads of departments and heads of sectors, when they see us there as women who are leading, they also, feel a bit better. They feel a bit more aware of themselves that, okay, women can also do this thing, See, she's also there talking, and, the CDO, the community development officer is there, the environment officer is there. These are women and they're talking to all these men here. I can do something also. Just our presence there also kind of gives them a bit of confidence at times. At times we address things head on when we're talking to the community. At times we address things head on. I mean, we will talk and we'll say, okay, men, we know most of the times you want to dominate and your decisions can be a bit overbearing. Can we please give the women an audience to say something also? Don't try to cover them. They are also human beings. They have brains which are very functional. They have good ideas. So sometimes we address it head on. And then sometimes we also have in the New South project, there's a grievance redress mechanism in place. so that, let's say, if there's inequitable distribution of household income, you know, the madam can just raise her voice, the community development officer and the other community facilitators, and we'll go down and talk to the man and try to address that issue. There was a particular incident where, and women are becoming more aware of themselves, yeah? There was a situation whereby we had summoned the sub-county chief to identify households, and we had asked him to inform both the head of the household and the woman of the household to come and attend the training because we were going to distribute seedlings. But the gentleman chose to come with his son. Anyway, we trained both of them. The seedlings were given to them. He went and planted. But the woman of the house thereafter, because she was not involved, she did not feel involved, she did not have a sense of ownership of the seedlings which were being planted on the land, she decided to cut them all down. She plowed them all down and planted something else which she wanted. So women are becoming more aware of themselves. They're like, you know, I should also be involved. I mean, where's my decision in this? What's my take? What's my say? Why did you consult me? Yeah. So women are becoming a bit more aware. And
that's good.
Yeah, I think I understand.
Beverly, anything else to add? And then I want to make sure we have time for a question or two from the audience because we're running out.
So I think for me, I would like to look at it in a different perspective where, for me, it is very important to think about it in a way that what I'm passionate is about building skills. So that, I mean, in my work, I realize it is not that women will not know how to do it. The reason is, how are you going to help them to be able to speak for themselves? So my passion is to be able to build skills into people, because when you build skills, when somebody has a skill, for example, if you know how to drive a tractor, it's the same like a car. Nobody can take it away from you. So I think when women are confident of what they're doing or what they're saying, it allows them to speak in the community. But also in another way that I look at it, in my work, when a woman comes and tells me something that is happening in the ground, I ask them two questions, you know. Why is it happening? And they'll tell me, oh, it's happening because my husband said this. Why are you allowing it to happen? So I think it's women, we are also responsible sometimes for how people perceive us, and I think it is very easy for someone to manipulate you by just looking at you and thinking, you know what, this is their strength and this is their weakness. So what I try to address is, why is this happening when you're looking at it? And what is the worst that can happen to you if you go to the chief and report it? And how are you trying to solve the issue? Because it is good you have told me, but you're living with the issue in your house, for example. And for example, I would say, if a girl has finished primary school, and of course, we are in August in Kenya, we are always having a lot of problems between the Maasai and the Turkanas and the Pokot because they steal cows from each other because of dowry. So I ask my community, it's been, before I was born, the cows are being stolen every single year. But have we sat in the community and asked ourselves, why are we allowing this to continue? So my point is that we women need also to be responsible. And I know sometimes it's not easy to speak about it, but I'm sure if it was spoken about 10 years ago, things could have changed, things could have been better. So for me, I look at it in a different approach, is that you empower a woman, but you also allow them to know why you're empowering them. Yeah.
Well, and to encourage that shouldering responsibility.
Yeah.
It's up to you as well.
Yeah.
Question or two from the audience. There are a few women's voices we could probably hear from you all. Question.
Okay, so obviously this is not a woman's voice. Sorry about that. I don't have a question. So what I'm saying is some kind of contribution to just basically empowering women. So throughout my little experience in forestry, I've met a lot of women who are like really smart, and I'm not shy to say that they've been way smarter than I have ever been or even thought about. And right in my home too, I have a wife who's like way more intelligent than I am. I'm okay with that, but there's also one thing that I've noticed about the women. I'm speaking from the very African point of view here. And it may not apply to every African, obviously, but one thing that I've noticed is that women in general at some point settle for less, and it's like they achieve all the education and qualifications and everything, but they get to a point where they are like, okay, I think this is enough. There's no need to go further, and I have a problem with that because I think women in general can do way more than we the men. I think that's how they are wired. I'm being honest about this. Men, do you agree? Yeah. Anyways, yeah. I see some frowns, but yeah, that's okay. It's just based on the experience that I have had, right? So I'm just saying that African women should develop that habit of going beyond their comfort zone. I think at some point, and this is even among educated African women, like they get to this point that I think I've done enough. I have enough publications. I have enough qualifications, and this is based off of conversations that I've had with very renowned, people. That I think I'm a woman. It's enough for me. Like, you should be ready to go beyond your comfort zone. That way you empower yourself, and the respect that we men give to women who are like empowered that way. It's like you'd be surprised. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay.
Because I think if you have any other questions, I think that are coming from the audience, you can take one more. And if not, maybe I'll close this out. Do you have any other questions? That are not from the crowd.
Okay, mine's not a question, but I really appreciate what you asked about addressing this patrilineal, system within our community. In Uganda, the land tenure system is a bit insecure. The policies. Can you speak? Okay. In Uganda, the land tenure system is a bit insecure. The policies and so forth. I think it's really a good area for me to look into. Yeah. How will we address the issue of the patrilineal system of land ownership, and how can we ensure that, because these days anyway, women, I could say the educated women who have some bit of money, they buy land. They will not bank upon their family land, because that will not pass down to them readily. It will pass down to the boys. So women tend to buy land elsewhere now, where they have full ownership rights, decision-making rights. But concerning this ancestral land, I mean, it's a whole, the dynamics there, it's a whole quagmire of issues, because you have the clans, the different, social norms, traditions, and all that kind of stuff. You cannot readily take an action because the whole clan is there, and more so now you're a woman. I don't know how it's going to be addressed. I mean, the question you posed to me, I do not know how it's going to be addressed. It would be interesting, maybe we have some people from the African continent here, if they have some insight. It's definitely something I would like to think more about. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, again, I just have to say I appreciate the leadership that each of the three of you are showing. I'm going to ask you later how each of you overcame the barriers in your own lives to get to where you are and to be doing what you're doing and to express the strength that you have. I think it's remarkable. Thank you very much.
I just want to thank our panelists, and as I'm looking around the room at a conference surrounded by so many educated, brilliant women, and some really great men who are allies as well, I just want to encourage women to, I don't know yet what my thoughts are, I'm still gathering them, but I think we really wanted to have a conversation about the institutional and persistent sexism that we find within not only just environmentalism, but within all institutions. And these three women show us that they're unstoppable, actually, and they're amazing leaders. So we're so happy that they were here today, and we're so happy to have you with us. And I think Gabby's not here anymore, but she wanted to announce that she's right there. Okay, never mind. Gabby has an announcement just about the next couple things that are going to happen.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to Dr. Amy Vedder and all these amazing panelists. Right now we will have a short coffee break, and at 10:40 there will be a lecture here in Burke by the Congolese Plantations Workers Art League. This talk will be in French, and instructions to download the Interprefy app to hear simultaneous translation in English will be on these flyers that you see in the area of the tables. We will also be using this app to translate Spanish into English during our journalism panel later today. Lastly, we also wanted to remind you to please vote on our photo competition. You will see our photos in the opposite side of this floor on the left side. So thank you very much, and we'll see you back here.